Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at how to animate a 2D bouncing ball in Blender. Now I know the words 2D and Blender seem so far apart, but trust me, over the past 1 year, Blender has developed some amazing 2D animation capabilities, which is even evident in the open source movie that they created, which is called Hero. So this time we're going to look at how to use these capabilities to animate a bouncing ball like a pro. Now, to do that, you've got to install Blender, the link to which is in the description below, and open up a new file. And once you see the splash screen, which should look something like this, I have Blender 2.82a open here. You should choose 2D animation to get into the 2D animation workflow. Now, before we begin, just a short reminder, please do remember to subscribe to my channel if you want to know how to get proficient in using Blender for grease pencil and 2D animation projects. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so first let's have a quick look at the interface. Now, on the top corner here, we have what is called the outliner, which tells you what all items are there in your scene. So we see that we have a stroke and a camera object. Now stroke object is basically invisible, you can't see it, but the stroke object has two layers within it, which is the lines and the fills. Now you can think of stroke object as the object that holds all data related to a particular 2D object. For example, in my workflows, if I have to make two characters fighting with each other, I make one character as part of one stroke or one object, and I make another grease pencil object for the second character. And each of the individual layers for the characters, for example, the lines, the shadows, the lights and the darks and so on, those can be individual layers within the group that you see here. So this is something about the panel towards the side. Down below here we have the timeline, which is open for the particular stroke that is selected. This is particularly called the grease pencil timeline. You also have a generic timeline for objects other than grease pencil objects in Blender, which is what mostly 3D artists are concerned with, but we also use this for animating the camera. And here you have a very important feature, which is the mode. So the mode is actually highly context specific. So you can see so many different modes here only because we are within the grease pencil object called stroke. So for example, if I were to go into object mode, you'd see that if I were to select the camera, I would have no other mode except the object mode, right? But now since I'm on stroke, I have many different modes available for this particular object. Now how to navigate? Navigation is pretty simple. Even though this looks like a white blank screen, it is actually a 3D space which you can get access to by using your middle mouse button and dragging around. And there you see how the scene actually looks like, and this object right here is your camera, which I can select by just left clicking on it, given that I am in the object mode. If you want to pan around, you can hold shift and the middle mouse button and you can pan to the left or the right of the scene. If you want to zoom in and out, you can hold control and middle mouse button, and you can again drag your mouse to be able to zoom in and out. Now with that said, we would want to go back to the view that is shown with the camera. So I'll hit 0 on the number pad to go back to the original view, and we would want to go back into the stroke that was pre-created for us. So I'll click the stroke. Now I would want to name it something different. In our case, I'll go ahead and name this as the ball, and I'll hold all the ball data in this. I don't want to be shouting, so I'll write it as ball. Alright, now let this be lines, but let's make this layer within ball called ground, right? This will be our reference layer to show where the ground plane is. So what I'm going to do is go into the draw mode and here I have the pencil selected. You can change it to any of the available tools that are there, but for now I'm going to stick with the pencil tool. It has a black material selected. We'll talk more about materials in a second. Its radius is 25 pixels, so I'll make it fixed and not dependent on the tablet that I have, so that you can follow along, as well as I'll increase its strength to 1 and remove its dependency from the tablet as well. So once we have the tool ready to go and our marker being on line 1, I'll shift to grease pencil timeline, and as you can see, we have both the line and the ground plane selected. So with the ground channel selected, I'll now go ahead and hit the Alt key and drag my mouse across so that we have a straight line, which will be our ground plane. I'll hit Shift middle mouse button to just pan around and bring this down a little bit. That looks good. And don't worry about this gray area. This is just because that's the edge of our camera. We can always zoom in and zoom out. We're using Control middle click to see either more or less of it. Now to draw our actual ball, I'll go back to the lines layer and I'll select a circle from the tools options. Now I'll hold shift and drag to create our ball. I'll hit enter first to select it in place, and then use the pencil tool to give it an indication of its light and its shadow, just like that. Now this is the first keyframe. Let us say the ball reaches the ground in 6 keyframes. So I'm going to drag my timeline onto keyframe 6, and instead of redrawing the entire ball, I'll just go into edit mode. I'll select the ball, I'll hold G to be able to grab the ball and then move it down to the position where I want, which is here. So let's say the ball reaches here, or let's actually push it back. Let's say the ball reaches here. Now let's say in another 4 keyframes, that is at keyframe 10, I can grab the ball again, and now I can move it to a new point, let us say over here, which is the new high point for the ball. Or I can actually drag it back a little bit, let's say over here. Now if I want to see all of the keyframes in this onion skinning section right here, when the lines are selected, I'll go ahead and select the onion keyframes before to a higher number, such as 20, and I'll do the same for the keyframes after. And now you can see that we have all 3 keyframes visible. Now let's say in another 4 keyframes, the ball hits the ground again. So I'll hit G and bring it down back to the ground. In another 4 frames, that is at frame 18, I'm going to give this ball only 2 major bounces. So this is the second bounce, and in frame 22, let us say it hits the ground again, maybe a bit further, or maybe that's fine, and I can go to the keyframe before, which is this one, frame 18, and I can actually push this back a bit just to see how this looks like. And after this, maybe after a very small upward movement on frame 24, and then on frame 26, I'll grab this, I'll bring this back down here, and from 26 to let's say 30, I'll have this move from here towards the end of the line. So this is how our bouncing ball looks. Now if I play the animation, the playhead keeps going ahead, so I'll choose the end to be at frame 30, and later on we'll do double framing so that this actually moves down to 60 frames, but for now 30 is fine. So this is how our ball looks like so far. Now, what we want to do is to put in between keyframes in an intelligent manner. So what I'll try to do is try to use interpolation, and then we'll try to make it into the parabolic form as we expect a bouncing ball to be in. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's choose custom interpolation, and as the ball is going from up to down, it is accelerating. So let us try choosing a curve in this way, where the speed is slow at first but it accelerates towards the end, and let's use sequence. Alright, so let's see how this looks. In the keyframes, let's just choose all types to be able to see all of them. Alright, so this is not bad, but maybe we can do a bit better. So I think this is a bit too much. Maybe I'll leave it at this point. And I'll do all types, and alright, that's not bad. So we have all the in-between frames and it is speeding up. Now I can use the same interpolation on all the places where the ball is going down. So I'll do that first. Now going to the next set where the ball rises up, it actually slows down as it goes up. So let's actually reverse our interpolation like this, and then hit sequence, and you'll see new keyframes appear between the two. And since the ball slows down towards the end, I'll use a sequence like this towards the end as well. So now let's see how the animation looks. Alright, so it's beginning to look better. However, the problem is that it's very linear, but a real ball actually moves in a parabolic fashion. So all we need to do is just adjust the ball on the x-axis. On the y-axis we've already taken care of the height changing, but it's on the x-axis, on this axis, that we need to make sure that we are able to deal with the ball better. So all that I'm going to do is going back to frame number 2, as you can see here. I'll hit G and then I'll hit X so that the ball is logged only along this axis, and then I'll move it forward in this fashion. Since it is going to be parabolic, I'll take the last frame and I'll hit G, X again, and I'll bring it outward as well to serve as a good guide of where my balls in between need to be. So with that setup, it's easy to set up the balls in between, hitting G, X, and repeating the same process like this, and G, X, and like this. So now you can see that this is beginning to make a lot more sense. So I'm going to speed up and repeat the same process for all of the remaining steps. So now that we have that done, let's look at how our animation looks. Hey, it looks really good, but hey, there's still one element missing. This isn't looking dynamic at all, right? And the best way to make it dynamic is by adding squash and stretch. So let's go ahead and see what Blender has to offer in order to do this. Now you'll be amazed at this. All we have to do is go into sculpt mode, and you can actually play around with all of these lines that you have added. So here I have the push tool selected. I'll increase its radius to about 100 so that it is actually quite bigger as compared to the ball, and I'll let its strength stay at 500 or 0.5, sorry. Now what you can do is actually push around the ball like this. Isn't it amazing? So using this, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add some squash and some stretch to the ball, particularly on the landing and the poses before landing. For example, I'll squash it a little bit here, stretch it a little bit here, stretch it even further over here, and stretch it from that side as well. Now it's interesting, so what I'm going to do here is also use exaggeration and kind of exaggerate this all of the way like that. Almost to the point as if it's touching the ground, like so. And when it hits, what I'm going to do is make it squash this way. So again, it looks like that. And then when it starts, you actually don't need to add any squash, but I'll still add a little bit of it just so that we get that much life into it. And then I'm going to repeat the whole process again. So I'm going to make it start to stretch as it starts going down, and just before it hits the ground, I'll actually go all in and make it already touch the ground even though it hasn't yet. That's like really pushing it and making it look alive. Now since it's beginning to slow down, I'm not going to squash it as much. We can still go for a little bit though. For example, making it squash all the way back as it comes to a halt, like this. So let's look at our animation once again. Yes, looks so much better, guys. That looks like a good bouncing ball. Let's go ahead and add some coloring and shading. So in order to do that, I'm now going to create a new layer and I'm going to call it colors. And I'm going to create a few materials in order to do that. So first I'll create the base color. Let's call it base. I'm going to turn off the stroke and I'm going to turn on the fill, and I'm going to change the fill color to a mid-red pinkish color. Now I'll go ahead and give this red pinkish color to the main body. So I'll go into the draw mode, I'll use my fill tool, and also I don't need to use onion skins anymore. So I'll go to my grease pencil object right here, clicking this green icon and turning off the onion skinning by pressing this button here. Now I'll use my fill tool and fill this area with the color that I was talking about, and then I'll just go forward and keep repeating this process. Alright, so now that we have that done, I'll add two more colors in the materials tab. One will be for the light and one will be for the shadow. Alright, so we're done with the coloring. Let's see how it looks like, and it looks pretty good, to be honest. Now, a couple of notes here. One of them is that we could have used the coloring at the initial stage as well, and then we wouldn't have to color each and every frame because we can just use the same colored ball and animate it. But I've done it at a later stage for the purpose of demonstration. And another thing is that the benefit of using materials instead of colors from a swatch in a different animation program is that now that you have these colors set up, you can always go in and change the color, let's say like this, and you can see the same color getting updated real time in all of the frames for the ball. So that's a definite upside to using materials, and you don't just have the option of using solid colors, but you can also experiment with different textures as well by clicking this icon right here. Alright folks, so now it's time to put a wrap on things, and I'll take you over the process as I speed things up. All I'm doing here is I'm using Shift A to add a mesh to the whole scene, and also changing the world color to a bit lighter blue instead of the white color that we see here. After that, I use Shift A again to add a point light to the system. In fact, I add two of those and shift them around to find the ideal lighting for the whole setup. Then I proceed to draw a character in the same exact method that we have drawn this ball. I also animate his eyes and interpolate them from point A to point B so that it looks like the character is following the bouncing of our ball. I also go ahead and double frame the animation so that it now occupies 60 frames instead of the initial 30, and I do that by pressing the G key followed by 1 in order to grab the keyframe and move it one step in the timeline. And finally, I go out into the object mode, select the camera and add keyframes to camera movement so that we can have the whole view looking somewhat like this. Alright, so that's how you animate a 2D bouncing ball in Blender. So guys, if you like the tutorial, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you're always updated whenever I drop my next video, which will be coming really soon. Until then, take care. Bye bye.